to experience a spiritual journey words cannot justify, then join us at Sam Travel and Tours and book your Hajj and Umrah packages today. We offer group and tailor-made packages for all your requirements. Based on Romford Road in London, for our last 10 days Umrah package, please call us on 0208 478 8911.
You lift me up high, you spread my wings and fly me to the sky. I feel so alive, it's like my soul thrives in your light. But how I wish you'd be here with me all year around. Ramadan.
Good afternoon, my name is Tahir Ashraf. You're listening to Revive FM with Barrister Tahir Ashraf, with Barrister Tahir Ashraf. Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf. Welcome all to the show. This, of course, is my journey here, my first show here, and I'm very fortunate to have with me a wonderful guest who's named Mr. Afzal Akram. He is a former councillor, someone who has had a great deal of an involvement within British politics. And first of all, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Tahir. Pleasure being here.
Welcome. Sorry, we didn't catch that. So.
Thank you for having me on, Tahir. It's a pleasure being here.
Wonderful. As you know, what we will do, I would like to talk about a little bit about the past week, and let's get on to this coming week. So this coming week, as most people are aware, we've got the European elections. The past week we have seen mental health awareness. Now, there have already been shows concerning mental health awareness and what have you here at Revive FM. But what I would like to focus on far more is the upcoming European elections. Lots of people are interested in Brexit, what's going on, where we go from here, whether or not we should be leaving the European Union, and so on. But what I want to focus on is what we have. We have the vote. Should people turn out to vote? Lots of people I've met on the street have said, yes, we want to vote. But many are saying we want to go for the parties and vote for the parties that are non-traditional. So you've got all sorts of parties that are emerging. One of my conversations was with someone who has been 20, 30 years involved in politics, and he'd said, actually in Britain we have a two-party political system. And this was a year ago. And Afzal, can I ask you this, as someone who's been a former councillor, how do you see the political landscape changing and evolving now?
Well, it's a question that can be answered in many ways. My own view is, and I agree with the person you spoke with, that traditionally the UK has been a two-party system. Either you had the Conservatives in power, and when they lost power, you would get Labour coming in. Certainly in my lifetime, that's what's been happening. And except for the coalition that we had with the Conservatives and Lib Dems, it's always been a Labour or Conservative running the show. And from time to time, you get new parties coming afro, single-issue parties or parties making a breakthrough. The SDP did it, and they became the Lib Dems. And now you've got newer parties like the Brexit Party, led by Nigel Farage, has made a show on the back of Brexit not happening. And you also have Change UK, which has been made up predominantly of Labour MPs leaving the Labour Party, with a couple of former Conservatives as well, and they're trying to operate in that so-called middle ground, if you like. Now, whether these parties are going to be here to stay and seriously change politics, or whether they're here, one election wonders, only time will tell. But certainly in the European coming elections, my time on the ground talking to people, campaigning, is that people may well give them an opportunity, because it's the European elections, doesn't have too much of a say, I would say, on the day-to-day services in your local area, your bins and so on. That's where your local councillors work on, and therefore the traditional parties may well get a kicking.
Well, I'm also interested to have a conversation with you on whether or not the local part or the mainstream parties ought to be getting a kicking, because surely the Brexit party, like you say, the likes of Nigel Farage, are actually a one-trick pony, are they not? Because Nigel Farage in particular, was one of the key players behind the Leave vote. And now he's obviously, as you say, emerging as part of the Brexit party. Should people actually be thinking of these as real viable options? Because do you not think that going for the likes of the Brexit party is actually a waste of the vote?
Well, look, let's address your question of the right to vote to begin with. I'm a firm believer that you should always exercise your vote. I'm also a firm believer that if you don't vote, you lose the right to complain about something not happening.
Absolutely.
People have died, and people are still dying across the world in trying to get a right for democratic elections and voting. So you should always vote for what you feel is right for you and your family. Obviously, we all have our own biased views on whichever party we support and we represent, but you should always use your vote. Now, Nigel Farage, like you said rightly, was a key leader as part of the Leave campaign. At that time, he was leader of the UK party. And he believes that Brexit hasn't been delivered in the way that the people voted to leave, and therefore he set up the new Brexit party as a way to carry on campaigning and try to convince the government, in this case, to make sure that Brexit does come to a conclusion. And the reason why the main parties, and certainly the Conservatives, may well get a kicking is because we still are in Europe. The public did vote to leave, and the government did say they were going to enact on it, but because of parties playing politics, I would say, in the House of Commons, and the deal hasn't gone through. We're still in Europe, and therefore this is an opportunity for people to show their dissatisfaction at the voting in the voting box, and therefore I think the Brexit party and other such parties may well get a higher vote, as did UKIP 4 years ago before the referendum.
Yes, I would also like to add that this is a live discussion, so people can call in on the studio number, which is 0333 444 0940. That's 0333 444 0940 if people would like to ask me, or indeed my guest, Afzal Akram, any questions or talk about the issues that we are talking about. We are on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Mixlr and TuneIn. And of course the website address for Revive FM is revivefm.co.uk. So you're listening to Real Talk with me, Barrister Tahir Ashraf, on Revive FM. I'm joined also by my guest, who is involved in British politics. His name is Mr. Afzal Akram, for those of you who are joining us now. So continuing on that theme, I'll pick up on one of the things that you have raised, and that is the right to vote, and that people have given their lives in across the world, and indeed in this country. One of the things that I think is quite important is that if, like you say, if you don't get out to vote, you don't have a right to complain. What do you think we as society can do? Actually, let's take a step back from we as society. What do you think politicians of the day can do, that's all of the parties, or rather the main two parties, what do you say the main two parties can and indeed should do to attract more people to vote? I was going to take it a little step further, i.e. to become involved in politics, but we'll park that for the moment. What do you think parties can and probably should do to attract more people to vote?
I think this is something for all politicians. It's core part of being a politician, and that is talking with your constituents, talking with local residents.
Yes.
And I think parties are, some better than others, doing what they can to what we call get the vote out.
Yes.
And speak to people. And therefore, it shouldn't be just at election time. I think you need to be constantly engaging with your electorate. It should need to be a two-way conversation. You shouldn't be sitting back waiting for your electorate to come to you and complain about issues, but on a regular basis you should be communicating with your residents to tell them about the work that you're doing as individually, as elected politicians, whether that be councillors or whether that be members of regional assemblies or even members of parliament or members of the European Parliament for this matter. You should be constantly writing to your electorates and let them know what your activity is about, what you're responsible for, how you can help them. And therefore, when they do come for help, and I think this is the most important part, is when they do come for help, you actually do try and help them solve their needs. Now, obviously, as a former politician, I'm fully aware that you can't always give everything to what everyone wants.
Yes.
And therefore, sometimes there are some unreasonable requests for help. But it's also a question of managing that and making the person feel like that they have been heard, their views have been taken on board. And if you can't help them, and I used to do this quite adamantly, is you need to give them a reason as to why not just ignore them.
Yes.
And therefore, if you have a two-way communication with your electorate ongoing, there's no reason why those people will not come out and vote. They may not vote for you, they may vote for somebody else, but if you're doing a good job, then I can't see why they wouldn't vote for you, even if they don't maybe support your party or its principles. And therefore, two-way communication is key.
Two-way communication. That's extremely valid point. It is an extremely valid point, and I completely agree with it. My thought process also is that if, for example, there is a set of circumstances where what we see at the moment is a lot of media messaging is going on, the likes of Facebook, the likes of Twitter, the likes of other types of social media, are politicians actually getting their message across? Because I'm not convinced that the main parties are actually getting their message across. In fact, I was just reading earlier this morning that Nigel Farage and his Brexit party, for example, around the time that they had launched, they have seen on Twitter an enormous rise of followers. And that rise of followers has been investigated by The Guardian and other journalists, and they've passed that information onto Twitter, so that many of them can actually be deleted and that they can check, because what people are doing or what these so-called followers are doing is tweeting around 100, 140 odd tweets, say for example, very early hours in the morning. Now, whatever the key issues are, whether or not they are actual bots or being hijacked or not real followers or fake accounts, that's happening, and obviously the likes of Twitter and the powers that be are dealing with that. But that dealing with it is coming, but will it be coming at a cost to the main parties? So the way I see it, and what I say is an issue, is that the main parties are not reaching out via the likes of social media. Would you agree with that?
I think with social media, the invent of social media has its positives, and you've quite clearly described some of the negatives as well. The control of that media is lost to a certain extent. Now, some people would argue and say, well, that's good. Why should it be controlled by a handful of powerful media moguls? We should be hearing the news as it is from individuals, and I don't have a big issue with that. But serious concerns needs to be looked at where you've got bots, you've got foreign countries, bodies, players, call it what you like, agents, call it what you like, how big a conspiracy theorist you are,
well,
controlling some of that news, because I think it's fair to say, and everyone probably agrees on that, had it not been for social media, you probably would not have had Trump in power. You probably would not have got the referendum through and so on, because news has traditionally been controlled. And I remember growing up, it used to be whoever the Sun promotes on its front page would win the election. Yes. And those days seem to slowly disappearing, which leads back to your question of the main parties. And I think the main parties were slow in adapting to social media, but like any new technology, the incumbents usually aren't the first. Yeah, it is smaller players, it's people looking to break in, people looking to do different things, whether that's business or elsewhere. They're the ones who come in first on this, and that's clearly what's happened here. And the main parties are still playing catch up in getting their messages across using social media as well as traditional radio, TV, and newspapers as well. So it's a catch up game for the big parties.
It is a catch up game, but see, what troubles me, and you'll recall some of our earlier discussions, not just in the studio, but obviously we've known each other a while, and some of the discussions that you and I have had have been around he who shouts loudest. I, for one, have never been the sort of man who has been interested in he who shouts the loudest gets my vote. As you know, my background is in the legal profession, so actually the way I see it, surely it's the actual message that matters. But part of the issue, I think, and it might be an issue of regulation and legislation, but the issue, I think, needs to be addressed of he who shouts the loudest. So why are the main parties not shouting loud or loudly at all? Because not only do you have the rise of the likes of Farage, you also have other issues insofar as extremism is concerned. That's right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism, all sorts of other issues that quite simply weren't on the agenda 20-odd years ago. So people, I would say, are very much disenfranchised, and to say they are not happy is an enormous understatement. They are not happy with the politics of the day, politicians of the day. And if we look at also the Liberal Democrats, which as the third party, they are the only ones who seem to be offering a real alternative to the standard two parties that we have. I'm not sure if standard is the right word, but certainly to Labour and the Conservative Party. I'm not here in my capacity as a presenter of this show. I'm not here batting for any of them. Naturally, as you know, I can't. But should people not think about using their vote in a slightly different set of circumstances, i.e. the Lib Dems, as opposed to the likes of Nigel Farage or the likes of Change? Change, for example, as you mentioned earlier, they consist predominantly of Labour MPs, some from the Tory party. But where we are today, actually, those people who are not interested in leaving the European Union, the only real viable option for them really are the Lib Dems. And that, I think, is very hard to disagree with. So if people are listening to this, obviously you're very welcome to call into the studio. You're listening to me, Barrister Tahir Ashraf. Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf on Revive FM. The studio number to call is 0333 444 0940. We are, or you can text in on 07851 391 365. I don't have the numbers in my heart and mind as yet, but certainly will be by a couple more shows, as it were. We're also live on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, Mixler and TuneIn, and of course you can catch us online at revivefm.co.uk. Come and join us in our conversation. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about the upcoming elections that are taking place on Thursday, the 23rd of May. These are the European elections, so that every party, or the vast majority of them, can elect their members for the European Parliament, so that they can represent our views, the views of the British people in the European Parliament. European Parliament, as you know, has 27 other countries as well. So do call us, get involved, give us a shout, ask us a questions. You can ask me, Barrister Tahir Ashraf, whatever questions you want relevant to the topics of politics and voting. Whether people should come out to vote in the upcoming elections, you can ask my guest, Mr. Afzal Akram, who's very kindly agreed to be part of this show, so I thank you for that as well. The number to call is 0333 444 0940. Do give us a call. So, as I was saying, Afzal, if I can pick up on that again, surely those people who are only interested because you've got virtually half the voting population that did vote in the Brexit referendum, the EU referendum, 48%, shall we call it, voted to remain. And 52% said, no, we want to leave. Now, at that point in time, no one knew what leave was going to look like. And we all did know, or the vast majority of people knew, that remain was simply going to be, at the very least, continuation of the status quo. Now, I say that, but perhaps I should temper that with the fact that actually David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, did negotiate a deal at the time which was better than what had been the position for the previous years. So, surely, and I'm asking this as devil's advocate, surely the better way forward now is remain, isn't it? Given that we've already spent in excess of, from my understanding, £5 billion towards trying to get to a Brexit which not very many people are keen to have, and whilst at other times other people are 100% for it. And in fact, people like Nigel Farage are saying that we would much rather have a no-deal type Brexit scenario. Surely that can't be good for Britain, can it? So should we, as a nation, be going towards the Lib Dems, or should we as a nation realistically be going towards Brexit of some sort? What do you say to that?
Well, look, as a Brexiteer myself, obviously I'm not going to agree with that statement, just because you haven't reached to a conclusion of what the referendum result was, which was leave, quite clearly leave, doesn't mean you abandon it and go with the status quo and go for remain. But just to answer your question regarding the Lib Dems, you have, the Greens and Change UK would disagree with you, and they say that they are Remain as well. They're for a public vote and they want to remain. And therefore what you'll probably get is that those people who want to remain are going to be split between your Lib Dems, between your Greens, between your Change UK, and Labour depends what their policy is today because it keeps changing all the time. So you can't
Yes.
tell. Labour really haven't come off the fence and said we're one or the other, and it's very confusing. Talking to Labour friends of mine as well, they're very confused as well. And the same issues in the Conservatives. There is obviously a divide. If the Conservative Party hadn't been divided, we would have left on March the 29th, and the Prime Minister would have got her deal through.
Yes.
And we would have left. I mean, you asked me my view. My view personally is I think we need to get out of Europe. And we need to get out of Europe quickly. With the Prime Minister's deal, in my opinion, is probably not the best deal. You can always get better, but it gets us out of Europe. And once we're out of Europe, we can then obviously further negotiate and do what we want to do. And it's easier doing that when you're out of the camp than still in the camp, because then the hope of remaining has disappeared, and therefore both sides can then logically get on with how can we make this relationship work. Because let's not forget, and let's not kid ourselves, let's put the posturing to one side. Europe is as important to us as we are to Europe. We can't live without them, and they can't live without us.
That's actually quite a brilliant point you've made, that Europe is quite important to us, and we can't live without Europe, and Europe can't live without us. So surely there needs to be a better deal, ideally a better deal than the one that is on hand and available at the moment. It's challenging, to say the least, to figure out what Labour's position is going to be. And I was reading the papers over the course of the weekend, and on the one hand, you've got Jeremy Corbyn saying talks have gone as far as they can. On the other hand, we've got the Prime Minister, Theresa May, saying, actually, we're not at fault and that you are. But surely, and you've said you're a Brexiteer, surely it's the Brexiteers to blame, are they not?
Well, look, the talk,
who are
my
keen
own
in
view is
pushing
this,
Brexit.
My own
as
view
opposed
was
to
these talks were doomed for failure for all they started. But, the Prime Minister's got to go through the process of talking with the opposition and seeing we can get to a deal. The two camps were stuck in where they wanted to stay. And I believe officially the talks are being called off now, so they're not resuming.
Yes.
And therefore there is only one deal on the table. People keep talking about a better deal. There is only one deal on the table. Europe have not given another deal. Having a time machine and going back and restarting, it's a great opportunity to have, but we don't have that facility. We are where we are. The Prime Minister's deal's on the table, and so my view is I think we should vote on it, get it through, and then once we're out of the camp, like I say, once we're out of Europe, then I think common sense will settle in on both sides that now we have to make this work. We're in the real world now. We're not posturing. We're not in Europe's shoes making it hard for the UK to leave so that nobody else leaves. In our sense, whether you're the Conservatives or Labour looking strong in one way or the other because you're playing to your voters, then it's common sense, day-to-day living. We're out of Europe now. How are we going to move forward? And as I said, Europe is important to us, but so is the rest of the world. And increasingly, the rest of the world is more important to us, I believe, than Europe will be in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
But we can't really get anywhere without a deal. So what sort of a Brexiteer are you? And this is obviously a very personal question.
I would like to leave. I would like to leave Europe with a deal.
With a deal.
I think with a deal
Yes.
is the best way to do. The Prime Minister has a deal. For all of us, it will never be perfect. We will always want little things that personal to us, added or deleted from it, but we have a deal on the table. It's the best that we can probably get from Europe at this stage, so I believe we should vote for that deal, get out of Europe, and then as future negotiations, and remember the stage 2, which is the interesting bit, which is the trade, on how we're going to trade, that's where you then start further negotiations. And like anything else, it's like, any deal, any negotiation, it's always up for renegotiation at a time that suits both parties. So this isn't, that's it, and the next 100 years is not going to change. But unless we leave Europe, I don't think we're going to get any progress.
Yes, you've mentioned the word posturing. That's a very important word. It is far more prevalent in politics of today than it ever has been. And of course, posturing in politics is something that is seen across not just Britain, but across global politics as well. That's an interesting point, and to me, it is one of the key reasons as to why I myself have thought about actually getting involved in British politics. And what I say is people should get involved in politics. But before we go into that, I'm going to ask you a question or two on that, on posturing. I'm going to ask people and just remind those viewers and listeners who are joining us now. You're listening to Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf on Revive FM. The studio number to call in is 0333 444 0940. The text number is 07851 391 365. We are on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We are also on Mixlr and TuneIn. Hopefully someone will tell me if I'm saying that wrong. In the meantime, you can catch us also on revivefm.co.uk. We are smiling. It's a Sunday. Although many would say politics is nothing to be smiling about, but against that, politics is part and parcel of the fabric of the nation. And on the posturing side of things, I have with me my guest, who is Mr. Afzal Akram, who is a former councillor. Afzal, do you think there is too much posturing in British politics at the moment, or do you think there is not enough? On the one hand, we're used to a diet of, say, for example, Tony Blair, who was an exceptional communicator. We've had David Cameron, and now we have Theresa May. So these three, of course, we've had Tony Blair, we've had Gordon Brown, we've had David Cameron. As part of the Cameron government, we've also had with him the deputy PM, Nick Clegg. And since that era, the Conservative Party in 2015 took power themselves, had a good majority, and we've then had we've then had the EU referendum. We now have Theresa May after that. So from the likes of Tony Blair to the likes of Theresa May, we've seen arguably good orators and so on. As leaders, they differ. Conversely, we've had the likes of Nigel Farage. You mentioned Trump earlier. We'll come on to Trump more as well. And we've seen other European leaders and what have you. We've seen Canadian leader Justin Trudeau as well. Do you think there is too much posturing in British politics, or do you think actually there's not enough, particularly within the two main parties?
Look, I use the word posturing quite lightly, because posturing, in my view, is how you are seen doing something. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if we link this to your earlier comments around social media,
yes,
in the old days, your posturing was probably on the 4 TV channels, possibly Sky, the newspapers, a radio interview, and that's all people saw. Nowadays, with the advent of social media and your various social media profiles that people are followed on a daily basis, especially as politicians are. Mm. Nowadays, individuals can get their comments directly out as well. So being seen doing the right thing is as important as actually doing the right thing. And the example I used on the posturing was, and I believe Europe are posturing, is that they are looking to show their other member countries that, look, leaving Europe is not good for you. And if the UK, as big as they are, the 5th largest economy in the world, if they're having all these issues and all these problems, then imagine how bad it will be with you. God forbid you decide to leave. Because if they made it nice and easy for UK to leave, and this is a personal opinion, if they made it nice and easy for the UK to leave, and we left nicely, we had a nice deal with them, handshakes and claps on the back on both sides, and we left on March the 29th, and away we go, we're flourishing, I can tell you there'll be another 6-7 countries ready to go next year, because they can see that. So that's why posturing is important, has become more important over the past few years, because the politician has been brought a lot closer to the electorate, and so to be seen doing something is as important. And your question of leadership, I think, is very important. No two leaders are alike. Leadership is a skill, it is a talent you have, and you need different leadership styles to get through different problems and different issues. And if you can't adapt as a leader, then you're not going to be a leader for long.
Well, that is something that the Conservative Party, as we speak, is riddled with, i.e. a leadership issue. But before we tackle that, or before we have a conversation on that, I want to talk to you about the posturing that you've said insofar as Europe is concerned. Do you really think that Europe has been posturing in terms of sending a message to the other EU27 that if you were to seek to leave, you're going to face a similar fate?
Yes,
Because my own view is somewhat different. My own view is that I don't think Europe have been posturing per se. Surely it's us as the Brits who have been posturing. Surely we are the ones who have been saying, oh, we hold all the cards, and that we're going to, use these cards, as it were, at a certain time, or that we're not going to be doing this insofar as giving a commentary is concerned, and so on. So actually, surely we shouldn't have treated it like a game or a divorce. Or do you think, and I'm going to give you my own view on this, that the underlying legislation was a flaw? And as a barrister, my own view is that the underlying legislation that says the country that wants to leave has 2 years within which to negotiate a deal. We as Britain have demonstrated, we have led the way in showing the world, the rest of Europe, that 2 years is not enough to negotiate a deal. As much as we like to be leaders and innovators in this bit of legislation, I think we've certainly realised that 2 years is clearly not enough. But is it the case that the 2 years is not enough because of posturing? And I don't agree that Europe has been posturing per se, because actually we are the ones, surely, who've been saying, oh, we want to get out of this. We are the ones who are being controlled. We want our sovereignty back. We want to control our borders. And I completely accept the migration arguments. I understand that completely. But what troubles me, insofar as the posturing is concerned, that you've had the likes of Nigel Farage showing posters of, in essence, refugees, and thereby passing off as though it is somehow that migration that is directly linked to Europe, when actually it's a completely different point. So surely we as Brits, that includes Nigel Farage, British media and so on, surely we are the ones who've been posturing a great deal more than our European counterparts. Do you not think that's a bit more difficult to argue with?
Well, look, Nigel Farage has been posturing since day one. That is Nigel Farage for you. So let's tick that one off and move on. The reason why I say Europe, because if Europe wanted this to be done quite easily, then right from day one, Europe would not have broken up the withdrawal agreement to the trade agreement. We could have negotiated both side by side. So when it came to the final vote for us here in the UK, we would know, what is this deal going to cost us financially? What else are we going to have to give up? And what are we getting in return, i.e. the new trade deal? And therefore, when we're then going for a vote in the House of Commons, you know exactly what you're getting. And part of the problem we've got now is that we're agreeing what we're giving and the amount of money we're paying and everything else.
Yes.
We've looked at all the issues, but all the good stuff that's supposed to be coming out has not been discussed, and therefore you've got nothing to counterbalance it. And that's where I think if Europe were not posturing, in my view, and were looking to make it easy for us to go and work with us in a hand of partnership and negotiate, they would not have split this up. And the reason for splitting it up, is, in my view, is purely in Europe's interest and not in our interest. Have we made a mistake in agreeing to that? My personal view is I think that was a mistake. We should have stuck to our guns and said we're going to do the two together. Because in any negotiation, A negotiation is only successful if both sides agree on something. One cannot
Yes.
control the other. And I think at times we've probably allowed ourselves to be a bit more controlled, hoping that Europe would be friendly and negotiate, and Europe has stuck to their guns, which has been right for them.
Yes.
For them, the negotiation has worked out perfectly fine to what they wanted. We now got to look going forward, and I believe
Yes.
going forward there is a deal on the table. I think we need to take that deal. I think we need to leave Europe. And once we've left, then we start to renegotiate. And in the case of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister has already said that once a deal has been accepted, she will step down and there will be a new leader in place. And then the new leader gets an opportunity to restart those negotiations on phase 2 and anything else we do. And it's a new ball game.
Yes, you make some very valid points that are extremely important to consider. I do like the point that both deals ought to have been considered simultaneously. That is something that I think British public ought to be thinking about. In my own view, I want to think about moving this conversation from the Brexit deal per se to the upcoming elections that are now virtually upon us. It's Thursday within a few days. And what do you say the parties can and should now be doing to get the vote out, as you called it earlier on? Because posturing and the like on social media has achieved the likes, the rise of the likes of Trump. They have been very good at getting out their vote. Trump has been good at getting out his vote. Nigel Farage has done enormously well in terms of getting his side voting. That is why we have Leave. We are where we are. What do you say the politicians of the day can do, certainly the mainstream parties can do, to get the vote out between now and Thursday? I mean, should people be voting? Should they not? I mean, I was involved in the elections a couple of weeks ago, and many of the ballot papers had all sorts of messages sprawled across them, so people are actually disillusioned. Should we have fewer elections? Should we not have just fewer elections? Because in 2014 in Britain, well, not quite in Britain per se, a part of Britain, in Scotland, we had the referendum. In 2015 we had the general election. In 2016 we had the Brexit EU referendum. 2017 we had a general election. 2018 and 2019 we've had more elections, and the parties are now thinking actually that if this deal doesn't go through, yes, there's going to be a leadership contest within the Conservative Party, but as far as Labour are concerned, they are vying for another general election on the basis of there being...
Well, that's been part of the problem. All Jeremy
Yes.
Corbyn has done throughout the whole process is stand for, because he wants a general election. He doesn't care about Brexit. He
Yes.
doesn't care what happens. And therefore, I don't think he's done a proper opposition job. All they've done is stuck in, and we want a general election and nothing else. All their decisions have been based on that.
But-
I think people should vote. You should come out and vote. I've said that from the beginning. You should use your
You
vote.
have, yes.
You should come out and vote. Obviously, I would say come and vote for the Conservative Party on there, but people are going to be dissatisfied. I think the turnout is going to be low because there is some fatigue. There's been
Yes.
lots of elections around, so people are going to come. Secondly, people are actually quite upset because in the referendum, people were told, come out and vote, and we will do what you tell us to do. Because ultimately the people should be in charge, and that hasn't happened. And therefore those people who came out and voted in referendum and maybe haven't voted in years or have never voted are simply not going to vote anymore and think, well, hold on, you lied to us last time. All politicians are being called liars now, unfortunately, because of what's happening with Brexit. I still believe that the democratic right, the system that we have, ultimately will get us through. Okay, we'll get us through. You should come out and vote. You should vote for the party that you believe is the best to deliver for what you believe. And in my case, that would be Brexit. But the results are going to be a mixed bag. The results are going to be a big mixed bag and probably not what each party is expecting. My own belief is that it's a short-termism, and there's still a question of whether these MEPs will sit or not, and whether we will have Brexit before they actually get there. But because we missed the deadline, we're having to go through yet another election.
Yet another election. Indeed, and I think that part of the challenge is going to have to be getting people out to vote, because many people, as you say, are tired, are sick and tired. But one of the things that has occurred to me is, if people are sick and tired of politicians and want change, how do we change? Surely the only real way in which to change is to be able to change oneself. So if we don't change ourselves, that's all we are going to get. That is all we are going to get. We are only going to be lumbered with those who are able to shout and talk the loudest. We've all seen it. And if that is what we are content with, do we have anyone else to blame? And I would argue that we don't have anyone else to blame at all. And you have said that you want people to come out to vote. Yes, absolutely, 100%. You have said that ideally you would want them to vote for the Conservative Party. You're a member of the party. Obviously, there are other parties out there. People can vote for whomever they choose, whomever, as you have said, that they think will deliver for them. One of the things that I would like to see more, having been a couch politician for a number of years, I wonder if I'm the one who has actually coined the phrase couch politician. I have no idea. But I've considered myself for a number of years to be a couch politician, having been sick of that, screaming at the television that actually, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Right. Need to get involved. So I would say, don't just get out and vote. Get involved in politics. Get involved. If you want to borrow a phrase from others, if you want to make a change, be the change that you want to see. So, is this not really a call less for get out to vote, but actually more get out and get involved in the political system? Because the British democratic system that we have, it's the only one we have. We haven't got a different system. There are many countries across the globe that don't have a democratic system, and they are struggling, they are suffering. There's communism, there's socialism, there's all sorts of isms out there. But democracy, it isn't perfect. I don't think people can argue with that. It isn't perfect. It is what we have. Surely what we need, even now, I would say that the politicians of the day should be saying, get out and get involved in politics, rather than get out and vote. Would you agree with that? That the politicians should be saying, get out and get involved in politics, and not saying, get out and vote? I appreciate we're a week away, well, less than a week away. But do you not think that that is what the real call should be, to get more people to get involved in democracy, in British politics?
Look, one thing you can't say is that politics is boring at this country.
The politics is definitely not boring.
Secondly,
if
you
anything.
can't say that people aren't engaged, because people are engaged for one reason or another.
Well,
certainly engaged.
People are disenfranchised, and many are disenfranchised, many are engaged. But unfortunately, I would argue that there's a different type of engagement. There's far too much engagement with the likes of the far right. There's extremists, because like I say, those who are posturing and those who scream and shout the loudest seem to be getting a great deal more airtime.
As someone who's probably never going to get into power, it's very easy to offer everything. As the Lib Dems found out when they went into coalition, they had offered everything to everybody on both sides of the street.
Very
because
interesting
their
point.
assumption was that we will never have to deliver this, so we can offer it.
Very strong
suddenly
point.
you find yourself in position of power, and you suddenly realise that all those things you're offering actually are not feasible. They're not right for the country, they're not affordable, and you just can't do that anymore. And therefore the far left and the far right are very good at doing that, offering you everything, they're basically offering you what you want to hear, because they know they're never going to have to deliver it, and all they're after is sound bites, and get a good following and so on. Whereas the main two parties have to have worked out, costed manifestos, how they're going to deliver things and so on, and live in the real world because they know one of the two are actually going to be in power. So that is the major difference. And therefore, once your main two parties started doing that, I think that is the end of our politics, and our political system is broken then, because you can't just promise everything to everybody with unlimited money. It just doesn't work that way, and that's the major difference between the two main parties and most of the other parties, because they know they're going to have to deliver it, so they have to be real and in the real world, even if you can't sometimes understand what their position is. Whereas the left and the right, as you keep coming to, they will carry on doing that. The problem you have in the current climate and the way news works is with social media, and with the way these algorithms work in social media, is that, you know, if I type in the word, and my favourite team's Arsenal, if I type in the word Arsenal, I will continue seeing news stories about Arsenal and no other team matters. And this is what's happening now. If you're a leaver, the only news you're getting is Brexit leaving.
Yes.
And if you're a Remainer, the only news on some of these social media platforms you're getting is all the Remain arguments. And so people are becoming more and more entrenched in their view rather than listening to an alternative viewpoint from a credible source. Because it's very easy now, as Trump has proved it, if you say it enough times, it's fake news. People start believing it's fake news. And that is the problem that I think regulation, media regulators and social media companies, I think, have a responsibility to do, is to get to the end of this fake news and bring some credibility back. I'm all for opening up the media, letting individuals, you know, have an opportunity, like yourself, you know, have an opportunity of presenting and having a viewpoint. But a certain amount of regulation needs to be in place, because now we can call anybody an expert. Now we can call anybody a non-expert, even though they are an expert, simply by saying it's fake news. It's fake news. And that's the problem we have. And therefore, you know, we have seen on the ground a number of people who have got engaged, whether they've been disenfranchised or positively engaged, and started looking at and coming out and talking about politics and helping and doing. And I'm hoping that will breed a new generation of politicians who are willing to think and behave differently. Okay, and look at things differently, because things are changing. Lives are changing. Media is changing. Business is changing, and certainly politics is changing as well. If you're not going to change across that spectrum, then actually you are going to die along that way, whether it's a party or it's an individual. Okay, and there is questions of whether our system is right in the current climate. Should it be a first past the post system anymore? You know, it's worked for us for hundreds of years, but should it be that? You know, a lot of Europe, for example, other places use proportionate representation. Okay, now that has its pluses and minuses. So if you had proportionate representation in the 2015 election, I think it was, UKIP probably would have had 80 odd seats. Is that right or is that wrong? Certainly that's what the public voted for, but they ended up with one member of parliament. And therefore that disenfranchises people even more, because they don't understand the system. And then they think, well, hold on, we got so many votes, why have we only got one MP? But they don't understand the system. And so politics is not as easy as we sometimes make it out. But it's worked for us up to now. You know, we have got one of the oldest, I think it's the oldest democracy in the world. But we need to continuously, in my view, keep tinkering with it and making it fit for purpose for the current world that we live in.
We certainly need to make the system better. We certainly need a great deal more engagement. We certainly need a great deal more involvement from members of the public. Without the active and proactive involvement of members of the public, the system just doesn't properly work. Without that, Parliament will come to a grinding halt. It has already come to some form of a halt by virtue of the deal not going through. People are disenfranchised, but the way I see it, people need to become more involved. And what you have said, insofar as politics is changing, it is absolutely changing. The media regulation you've raised, media regulation, is something that is going to have to be considered very seriously. But it has been Europe who have given us a great deal of regulation. Take, for example, GDPR from last year, and see where we are now and where we continue to be in, say, 6 months and 12 months from here on.
So, Tahir, you say, and I've heard other people say that, I really feel strongly about it, Europe hasn't given us anything. We were part of that deal. Okay, so we have continues with the other European partners, decided that GDPR
Yes.
is the right thing for us to go
Yes.
to. And just because we're leaving Europe doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we
Absolutely.
throw the good points out. What we do is we keep all the good regulations that come in, everything that is helping us and our economy, we keep those. But in
Absolutely.
addition to that, we build in new rules, or we get rid of some of the rules which are actually holding us as an economy back. They may be good for a particular country in Europe for where they are in their economic cycle.
Yes.
But for where we are in our economic cycle or our social cycle, maybe it's not right for us. So we need to do what's right for us now. Okay, and that's what will give us, once the shackles are off and we can make our own rules, make our own regulations, keep the good parts and make the other parts better.
Yes, I agree with you entirely. And actually, some people who are Remainers might actually view the shackles as not being shackles per se, but actually something that we have given by virtue of the 1972 Act. We've given over our aspects of sovereignty ourselves and therefore contributed towards it. But be that as it may, time will tell us where we end up. Whether we live to see it or not is another matter. But you raise a very valid point, and that is we will thereafter be able to agree and negotiate deals with the rest of the world. And I look forward to a time where we as a nation can lead the world again, we can be successful again. Whether that is depending on whatever deal it is, with whichever deal we have, I would, like you, I share the view that we need to have some form of a deal. What form that deal takes, time will tell. And let's see where it takes us. And you're listening to Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf, with my guest Afzal Akram. We are here at Revive FM. The studio number is 0333 0940. The text number is 07851 391 365. We're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Mixler and TuneIn. You can also catch us online at revivefm.co.uk. So, looking forward to the elections next week. I take it you're going to be remarkably busy with plenty of feet on the ground and so on as well.
Definitely. All hands on deck at election times.
All hands on deck at election times, yes. So really no rest for you then, is it? Because you've been quite busy over the last few weeks and you're continuing to be busy this coming week with the European elections now.
And because this show was on politics, I was allowed an hour off to come and talk with you.
Well, I'm certainly very grateful for you to have come in and shared your thoughts and views. Whichever side of the Brexit divide you and I might be sitting, it's clear that the Brexit agenda is going to continue to dominate the debate, and certainly up until the point of next week or the following week of the 3rd of June, which is when the vote is going to be happening. And if the deal gets through, then it gets through. If it doesn't get through, then it's going to be a case of where do we go from here? And is there likely to be a general election, or do you think there's more now talk of people agreeing to signing up to the Prime Minister's deal?
I'm so confident that we will have a deal agreed by the end of October. And we have one deal on the table, as I said before. It's the only deal on the table. And I think we should take that deal, leave Europe, and then start working on the exciting part 2 of working a trade deal with Europe, and looking at the future rather than spending our time looking at the past.
Well, thank you very much for that. That brings us on to an absolutely brilliant note on which to conclude this afternoon's session. Let's look to the future and not to the past. Though we must all learn from the lessons of the past. We all must learn from the lessons of the past. And with you, let's all look to the future. I take this opportunity to thank my guest, Mr. Afzal Akram, who's taken time out from his Sunday afternoon to come and join me as my guest here. Afzal Akram, you are a former councillor. You're well respected within the political community. You're an avid man who is involved in all sorts of businesses himself. And once again, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Tahir.
greatly appreciate your involvement. Thank you. You're listening to Tahir Ashraf. You're listening to Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf on Revive FM. The studio number is 0333 444 0940. The text-only number is 07851 391 365. We are on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Mixlr and TuneIn, as well as revivefm.co.uk. I'm here next week, again talking to you about the law and politics. My own field is law and politics, and therefore I'll be talking to you about current affairs on these types of issues. I wonder what next week's European parliamentary results will be. I'm sure we are all eager to have that behind us. Let's see where it takes us, whether the main two parties, Labour and the Conservative Party, are going to be given a kicking, whether they are going to be taught lessons, or whether people will realise that actually mainstream is the way forward, or whether there is going to be less voter turnout. Time will tell. There has been very little engagement and reduced over the years, and of course, as my guest points out, that there is voter fatigue. Let's see where this takes us. Time will tell. I'm now signing off from here until next week. Speak to you again. You're listening to Real Talk with Barrister Tahir Ashraf on Revive FM.
Of the world. However, more needs to be done. Support Water for All. Donate today. Call us now, 0300 3030 777, or visit us on minhajwelfare.org.
Hey bro, I need your help.